Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Hello friends, what's up? First of all, thank you very much for coming on my YouTube channel, and today we will be talking about one of the important topics of sociology, structural functionalism. So what is sociology? One of the basic questions that comes in our mind before moving on. Sociology is basically the study of structure of society. And there are various perspectives for studying the structure of society, and one of them is structural functionalism, and the other two are symbolic interactions and conflict theory. These two will be discussed in the upcoming videos, but here in this video we will be talking about the structural functionalism. So in structural functionalism we will discuss its key concept in the introduction, then we will move on towards the key principles, basic foundational assumptions of this school of thought. Then in this lecture we will also discuss perspectives on functionalism from various sociological and anthropological thinkers like Herbert Spencer, Emile Durkheim, Talcott Parsons, A.R. Radcliffe and Malinowski's thinking. Then we will discuss its strengths, and in the end we will discuss its criticisms, which also came with the decline of this school of thought. So without further ado, let's move on towards the lecture. In this slide we are going to talk about the basic concept of structural functionalism. So what does a structural functionalism really talks about is that societies have order and interdependent parts like biological organisms that are held together by cooperation and orderliness. So what does this basic paragraph means is that just like a normal cell, a biological cell, there is a nucleus in it, there is membrane and other parts that work in a cooperative manner for a cell to function properly. Similarly, a society have its own interdependent parts that work properly and in interconnected manner for a society to function properly and for a society to work in an equilibrium. And this analogy of comparing biological organisms with the society was made famous by a very famous sociologist, Herbert Spencer, that we are going to discuss about in the upcoming slides. But here this analogy of comparing with biological organisms can also be extended towards the non-biological things, just like for example a normal clock, a wall clock. It contains few gears and two hands and a few printed page for us to show the time of the day, and if any of these parts doesn't work properly, what happens is that the clock doesn't show us time and it doesn't work properly. Similarly, this can also be extended towards a normal car. What does a car need? A car needs an engine to work or to move, and 4 tires for it to support, and there is an axle, and there are all other parts that work in an interconnected complex manner to work properly. So societies have also its interdependent parts, and what are these parts? These parts are institutions and social facts. We will talk about these institutions and social facts in the upcoming slides, but here just understand these basic things make up the society and they work in a cooperative manner. So this theory was created by Emile Durkheim, and it examines the necessary structures of society and how each part plays its role to make society a stable structure. So this theory basically looks at the society from a macro level perspective. What does I mean by macro level perspective? From an overview perspective in which how each part works in a proper manner. So that was all about the basic introduction of structural functionalism. So let's now move on towards understanding about the key principles that make up the base of structural functionalism. So let's move on. Key principles of structural functionalism. These are the basic foundational assumptions of the structural functionalist thought, and one of the most important principle is interdependency. As we know, structural functionalists say that society is made up of interdependent parts. Every part has its own job, and for the society to work in an equilibrium in a proper balanced way, every part has to do its job in a proper manner. So if one part is affected by any problem and it doesn't perform its job, then it affects the whole society. It affects the other parts that are being dependent on it. We can understand this interdependency by a simple concept, like for example, if a car is moving on a road and one of its tire is being punctured by a nail or something. So what happens is that if this tire is punctured, then it affects the working of the whole car. Now the car cannot move any further and it cannot reach its destination and perform its function properly. So this interdependency is one of the core principles of structural functionalist thought. Now let's move on towards the other principles of structural functionalism. Second most important principle of structural functionalism is that functions of social structure and culture. Each part exists because it serves some function in the stability of the system. So for example, courts exist because they distribute the justice in the society. Police exists because it imposes the rule of law. Even the concept of democracy as a social institution exists because it furthers the interest of common people. So these all institutions and social facts and culture exist because it serves some function in the society. Without purpose, they wouldn't have been the part of our society. So that's another principle of structural functionalism. So let's move on towards the third principle of structural functionalism. Another important principle of structural functionalism is its consensus and cooperation. Societies have a tendency to move towards consensus, that is to say, have certain basic values that nearly everyone in the society agrees upon. If a society is not cooperating, or the societies are not cooperating, then what happens is that it hinders their success and it is a roadblock in the progress of a society. So societies have to build up those consensus and to work in a proper cooperative manner to achieve a certain goal or a task or success. This cooperation is what has led to so much success in the recent times, and it's also the main principle of structural functionalism. So let's move on towards the last principle of structural functionalism. Another important principle of structural functionalism is that of an equilibrium. What does it say is that society is always moving towards equilibrium. It is trying to achieve that equilibrium, the smooth working of various structure in an interdependent environment, best situated according to their situation. So it is always trying to achieve that balance in the society. Pardon my writing. It is always trying to achieve that right kind of balance in the society. So this assumption is a positive assumption in structural functionalism. It assumes that the society always tries to cooperate and always tries to move on towards the balance rather than being in the conflict on various things. So that's the last assumption or the last principle of structural functionalism. Functionalism according to various sociologists, and the very first one that comes in our list is Herbert Spencer, that we also discussed in the very first slide, and he was an English philosopher and a biologist. Here is this man who saw similarities between the society and a human body. He said that just like a human body needs various organs and body parts to function properly, similarly society needs social institutions to work in a cooperative, coordinative manner to work properly. And social institutions are basically structures that help and govern the behavior of set of individuals, and social institutions include our family, religion, peer group, economic systems, legal system, penal systems, languages, and the media. These are all social institutions that govern the behavior of individuals, and these social institutions work in a proper coordinative way for the society to work properly. So that was the basic concept of Herbert Spencer. Let's move on towards the other sociologists. Emile Durkheim, 1858-1917, a very famous French sociologist. Here is this man who is also known as the father of structural functionalism, who applied the Spencer's theory in order to explain how societies change and survive over time. Durkheim, just like Spencer, believed that society is made up of interdependent, interrelated parts, and they work together in order to maintain the stability or equilibrium of the system. Durkheim believed that individuals do make up the society, but in order to study the society, we have to study social facts, and these social facts are those invisible strings that works on an individual on a daily basis, and they shapes the behavior of a society and creates a complex society. Social facts are basically the laws, moral values, religious beliefs, customs, fashions, rituals, media. These are all the social facts that work on an ordinary person or on the group of people to govern their behavior. So that was the basic idea of Emile Durkheim, and in these slides I am just going to give the basic concept of these thinkers. I am not going to go into the depth of their thought. So that was the basic idea of Emile Durkheim. Now let's move on towards the other sociologists. Robert Merton, 1910-2003, a very famous sociologist and criminologist, just like all other functionalists. He viewed society as an organism with various parts, and all these parts works interdependently for a society to be a stable state. But he also recognized that there were some functions that were intentional and others functions were not. He also recognized that some functions actually disrupted the society, and he called those functions as manifest functions, latent function, and dysfunctions. So we will understand the manifest and latent function with the example of our education system. For example, you are going in a school and you are basically going to be educated and being introduced with the new ideas there, that is the manifest function of that school. And but due to being in the school, uh, you have made bunch of friends and knowing the values of friendship. These are unintended or unconscious function of a school. These latent functions can be beneficial or they can be harmful as well. So for example, if you got some friends that were into drugs and you are introduced to drugs in the school, so that was basically not the function of school. School was basically created for your education and for learning new things. But one of the latent negative thing that happened to you was that you went into drugs. That was the unintended cause. It can be beneficial, but it can also be harmful as well. So manifest function is the intended behavior of a certain part in a society, and latent functions are the unintended or unconscious behavior of that function. So for example, another example can be you are on social media to connect with the broader audience, with the world. You connect with the known and unknown persons, you can communicate with them. That's the basic manifest function of a social media platform, just like Facebook. But a latent function of social media is that it is now being used more heavily for the advertisement purposes. It was not created for that function, but it is an unintended cause or unintended function of the social media. So these are the manifest and latent functions that were given by Robert Merton. Now let's move on towards the other sociologists. A.R. Radcliffe Brown, 1881–1955, was a famous British social anthropologist, and his main focus in the functionalist school of thought was on understanding the social structure of the society. And he believed that there is a whole new level of social reality that is distinct from those of biological forms and inorganic manners, and institutions are orderly sets who perform their relationship in maintaining the system of the society. And he believed that individuals were just replaceable transient occupants of social roles, which change with time, but overall structure of the system remains same, and the continuity of the system is maintained by the process of a social life. And he gave the example of a cell. So over a period of time, while the parts of cell change, but the overall structural arrangement of the cell remains same. Similarly, in the human society connected by social relations, the social structure is not destroyed when the individuals or the units are changed. The overall structure remains the same. So that was the basic concept of A.R. Radcliffe Brown's structural functionalism. So let's move on to the next sociologist. Talcott Parsons, 1902–1979, a very famous sociologist from United States of America, and he viewed society as a system. And according to Talcott Parsons, for a society to survive and to function properly, there are four basic functional prerequisites that are needed to be fulfilled, and these four basic functional prerequisites are adaptation, goal attainment, integration, and patron maintenance. By adaptation, he meant that a society has to adapt according to its surrounding environment and fulfill the basic food and shelter needs of its members, and the economy is the institution that fulfills these adaptation basic needs. Then another prerequisite comes is goal attainment. Society as a system gets its goal from the political organizations, and the government is the one that sets goals and also allocate resources to achieve them. Even in the so-called free enterprise system, the economy is regulated and directed by the government. The goal is set by the basic institution of the government. Then another prerequisite that comes after it is integration. Integration means that the adjustment of conflict, the proper working of the system, and proper properly defining the norms and the legal standards of a society, so that the basic functioning of the system remains constant without any conflict between the interconnected parts. Then the last functional prerequisite for a system to survive is patron maintenance. So patron maintenance is being done with the performance of those family values, educational system, and the religion. Through this, patron maintenance is done and the society works properly. So these can be seen as problems that society must solve in order to survive. So each function of any part in the social system is understood by its contribution to the meeting of functional prerequisites. So that was all the basic idea of Talcott Parsons. So now let's discuss the strengths of the structural functionalism. One of the main strengths of structural functionalism is that it is positive in nature. It believes that in society everyone is working towards the common good of the society. So there is a positive nature in the structural functionalist thought, and it defines some structure to the society and gives importance of various institutions like education, the importance of a family. This gives a clear understanding towards the basic workings of society, basic motivations of the society. So these are few basic strengths of structural functionalism. Now let's move on towards the criticisms. So one of the main criticism that structural functionalism gets is that there is no importance of an individual. An individual is just a part in a system that is performing its function without giving much importance to its own needs. Then another criticism on the structural functionalism is there is no room for social change. Critics argue that functionalism is unable to explain social change because the rapid change in a society is very difficult in a functionalist thought to explain, because according to functionalists, the society is not developed for this change, this sudden change to happen, because if that happens, then every part has to adjust according to that, and that wouldn't be possible. If a rapid change happened, the whole structure will be destroyed. So there is no room for social change in structural functionalism, and it is too much focused on the integration. Far too much weight is given on the consensus, and it neglects the conflict part, that there is some conflict going on between different parts of the society, and this theory of structural functionalism completely neglects the conflict part. So these were the basic criticisms on structural functionalism, and that was all. Thank you very much for your patience, and I hope you liked this video. Please like, comment, and share and subscribe this video, and we will meet again in the next video. Thank you very much, and Allah Hafiz.